Hey everyone, my name's Alison,
And I'm Paige.
and we're sisters who love to read. So we decided over the next couple weeks we're going to be doing a couple videos on Canada Reads, and Paige is going to tell you a little bit about what Canada Reads is.
So, Canada Reads is an annual competition where CBC comes out with a list of books by Canadian authors on a variety of topics. And one of those books ends up being chosen as the book that every Canadian should read. So it
Mhm.
starts every year with a long list of books, and I believe it's usually 15 to 20 books. These are selected, based on many criteria, but just all Canadian authors, usually sort of more recent books published in the last like 5 or fewer years. And then after a couple weeks, a short list is picked. There'll be 5 books, and then between those, it's decided which will be the winners. There'll be 5 folks who are picked to champion these books. So it might be like authors, it could be politicians,
Athletes.
influencers,
Yeah.
athletes, like literally anybody. What they do is they pick a book from the long list to champion. And then in March, they go on like CBC and they sort of make their case for their book that they're championing. And each day, one of the books is voted off by the 5 amongst themselves. So it's really like entertaining. It ends up becoming sort of like a nail biter to see which one wins. And it's really fun to like read the books and have your own opinion on which one you want to win.
And it's nice to learn more about Canadian authors because I feel like sometimes on the bookshelves, like there isn't a lot of them, depending on where you're going. So it's nice to learn about. I think you were talking about the other day. It's nice that there's some authors that are a little bit lesser known, and so they're getting a little bit more kind of spotlight with this with Canada Reads.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes I'll look on Goodreads and I'll see, a given book like by an American author that has like 50,000 like ratings on Goodreads. And when I was kind of looking at some of these books from the long list, some of them had like 1,000 or fewer like ratings. So like I think it's really putting some hidden gems out there, um, sort of
Oh
on
yeah.
people's radar. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way also to build more awareness to Canada Reads because I don't know about you, but I've talked to a few people who didn't know what Canada Reads was. So it's a really cool opportunity to get more people involved and,
Yeah.
just read more books basically.
Totally. I stumbled
Yeah.
upon it a couple like 2 years ago on social media, and like I stumbled upon it like 2 days before it started, so I didn't have time to read the books, but I happened to have read 2 of them, so I still was sort of interested, and then I ended up reading the rest because like my interest was piqued, and then last year I was like, okay, this year I'm gonna read all of them. So
Committed.
when they announced the shortlist in January, like mid-January, and then the competition's in March, so it gives you time to read like the 5 books. Yeah, and last
And
year I
then you
found,
sucked me in. There you
yeah,
go.
exactly. Last year, like, I read the books. Some of them I liked, and some like weren't necessarily my cup of tea. But even listening to like the podcast, and with the folks like championing the books, I definitely gained like a huge appreciation for all of the books in the end. So I'm definitely looking forward to that again.
So what we'll be doing is once the short list is released, we're going to be reading all the books, and then we'll kind of do a little episode on each of the books, talk about them, get your thoughts as well. So yeah, pretty should be pretty fun, I think. This is also our first time video casting or videoing, so bear with us. I think yeah, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah,
You have anything else you want to say before we go to the
yeah,
long list?
well, there's a theme every year. I mean, the main
Mm.
theme of Canada Reads is um, a book every Canadian should read, which is like very extremely broad, but it's a good sentiment because it's not necessarily like best book or best selling book or anything like that. It's just like a book every Canadian should read, and then there's like a
Mhm.
sub theme. So this year it's
One book to change the narrative, I think.
yeah, a book to change the narrative. So that
Yeah.
definitely again is broad. I mean, but what does that like bring to mind for you? Like, what does that elicit when you hear that?
Something that's kind of going against the status quo or kind of like inspiring people to kind of change the status quo, which I guess I'm kind of saying the theme in a different way, but something that makes you think a little differently than you normally do. Yeah.
definitely.
Is that
Um,
what does it mean to you?
it like subverts your expectation for sure.
Mm.
And even like
Oof,
we'll
you
touch
were
on
ready with that one.
it like I've so when we'll talk about this is a good segue to the long list,
Mm.
where for anybody watching, the easiest way is just Google like CBC long list, and it'll show up. And I've only read one on the long list, so I'm like kind of happy about that because I want to like read something different. But even the book that I have read, I could see that like fitting under the theme because there's themes of like
Interesting.
motherhood and like things about motherhood that aren't necessarily talked about. So I think that
Mm.
book would like fit under that theme of changing the narrative. Um, and I can't tell if I like want that book to be on the short list or not.
Mm.
I because it's like I've already read it and
It's
I
called The
did
Whispers, right?
The
You should.
Whispers. Yeah,
Yeah.
The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. So
Hmm.
this is only her second book. And like yeah, I'd be happy for her if it was on the short list, but I also feel like I want to read 5 like books I haven't read. So I guess we'll just see. And you hadn't read any on the long list, but maybe I know there's at least one that you had heard of and you were interested in reading.
Yeah, I haven't read any of them. I did read Ashley Audrain's other book, The Push. Did you read that one?
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, it was like a really intense, like almost psychological. I read online, she said it's like a psychological drama through the lens of motherhood. It's a really intense book. It was the first book of like a 2-book contract, so I guess The Whispers is a second. Really interesting, really good. Curious. I'm sure The Whispers is also very good. Um, in terms of the other books on the long list, there was another one I recognized, which is called When the Pine Needles Fall. Um, I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've heard it's like a really powerful book. It's written by the Mohawk spokesperson during the Oka crisis, which was when the Quebec government tried to build a golf course over land known as the Pines, but it's an Indigenous burial ground. The author is Katsisikwas Ellen Gabriel. So it was a 78-day standoff between the government and First Nations. So regardless of whether that gets to the short list, I really want to read it. But I am betting now it's going to be on the short list. I think this is a strong contender for a winner this year. I'm just going to put it out there.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Early predictions.
Early predictions right here.
Yeah.
And yeah, the other like there's a couple other interesting ones. I encourage all of you to take a look. There's one called The Girl Runner, which is about this former Olympic athlete who was famous in the 1920s, and now she's 100 years old and in I believe, a nursing home, and she's kind of reflecting back on her life. So I know that you were kind of interested in that one too, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like there's some are nonfiction, some are fiction,
Mm.
and I think there could be some conversation at some point about um, changing the narrative and like doing that
Mm.
in different ways, like through nonfiction versus fiction, and like
Interesting.
um, going about that. I think it's hard to like say that in an abstract way without like referencing specific books, but that's something that crossed my mind.
Saying it could be done differently through fiction and nonfiction,
Yeah,
or yeah,
exactly.
because a lot
And
of people see nonfiction maybe as like a little more of a direct way of changing the narrative,
mm,
whereas fiction is still changing the narrative. It just like kind of pulls on different strings. I don't know how to describe
yeah,
it, but yeah.
definitely, definitely.
Um, any books, other books on the long list that maybe
Yeah, for
you're
sure.
thinking about reading, or maybe you think will be on the short list? Also,
Yeah,
I,
I
I
think
do want to
that.
say,
Uh-huh.
there's a good like diversity of authors as well, from people kind of all walks of life. You have Indigenous people, you have people who immigrated to Canada, people born in Canada. So it's a good mix, which I think is good because there's lots of kinds of people that live in Canada. So
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's actually a big part of why I kind of got into Canada Reads because I
mm.
do acknowledge that it's like very diverse, like authors, diverse books. Like if it was all kind of
Cis
on
white dudes.
this white dude, then I would kind of pass, I'd say.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I feel like there's a couple that definitely I was looking at. I can't like fully remember what each one was about, but All Our Ordinary Stories looked interesting. It's like a
Mm.
inspirational family book. And I did notice there was a graphic novel on it too, Clyde Fans.
Oh,
I believe that's a
oh,
graphic
okay. I was wondering
novel.
what that was. Oh,
So that's
cool.
cool. Watch out for her. It's like a thriller, I think. So that's kind of interesting too. And I feel like The Whispers is also has a bit of a thriller element to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, and we were like, talking about like how we will be consuming these books. Like I'll probably listen to some audiobooks, like read some on my Kobo. Like it'll be a mixture of things, and I think,
Yeah.
that'll be, it just kind of depends on, yeah, how we decide to consume these books.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever kind of feels right or whatever we have access to. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
think the other thoughts.
Um,
What's nice is CBC has kind of a list. If you look up Canada Reads long list, they have a little bit of a summary about the book and the author for each one. So that's super helpful if you're kind of thinking about which one you might want to read.
yeah, exactly. I did notice like one of them is translated as well from
Hmm.
French, I believe. So
Yeah, I think so.
that's good. Yeah, I'll be interested to see like who the people like championing the books are.
Yeah.
And like last year, there was like like there was an influencer, there was an actress, the ex like mayor of Calgary. Like it's like a really like
Yeah.
interesting mix, but all people just like love to read. So
Another one that I thought was kind of interesting, another book that piqued my interest is A Two-Spirit Journey by Mani Chakabi. It's an account of her life as an Ojibwe Cree lesbian. It looks like it's a really powerful and deep book. I guess we'll see what the panelists decide to bring forward and select champions.
and I
Yeah.
think changing the narrative, like it'll be folks who maybe find that certain book speaks to them because they're going to be the ones championing it. So
Mm.
that might
Yeah.
reflect upon what they want to change the narrative of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Oh, good
Um,
thoughts.
yeah. So our next little video cast here is going to be after the shortlist comes out. We're going to
January
start
23rd, I
January
believe.
23rd, less than 2
Yep.
weeks from now, and we will start sort of one by one reading the books, chatting about them, and we hope you stay tuned and
Yeah.
maybe read some of the books yourself.
Yeah, let us know in the comments if you have any thoughts on any of the books selected for the long list. And if you've read any of them, we'd love to hear about it.
So
Until next time,
until next time.
happy reading.
Happy
Bye.
reading. Bye.